She had always been a person who noticed little things others often overlooked. Every morning, she would arrive at the office a little early, not because she was trying to impress anyone, but simply because she liked the quiet moments before the day began. She enjoyed the soft hum of the lights, the gentle creak of the office doors, and the distant chatter of early arrivals in the cafeteria. It was in these small moments that her mind wandered, and her heart felt at ease. She didn't have a grand plan for her life, nor did she aim for fame. Her joy came from helping wherever she could and from the little things that made people smile. Music had always been a part of her life, though not in a professional way. As a child, she had spent hours at the piano her parents had in the living room, exploring the keys, making up melodies, and listening to the notes dance across the room. Her parents had encouraged her to take lessons, but life had other plans. The lessons had stopped, but the love for music never did. She carried that music with her everywhere, not as a career or a show, but as a companion and a way to calm her mind. Sometimes, when the office was too loud or stressful, she would hum a tune under her breath, feeling the tension slip away with each note. The company she worked for was not small, but it was not large either. It was one of those workplaces where everyone knew everyone else, and there was a mixture of friendliness and quiet competition. People came and went, each with their own goals, their own struggles, and their own dreams. She was not in a high-ranking position, nor did she want to be. She handled administrative tasks, organized files, helped with presentations, and ensured that the little details that could be easily overlooked were always taken care of. Many might have found her work routine or unremarkable, but she took pride in it. She believed that even the smallest contributions mattered. Some days were more challenging than others. The company had faced its fair share of ups and downs. Sometimes the workload felt overwhelming, and the deadlines seemed impossible. She noticed how stress could weigh down her colleagues, how a simple mistake could spiral into tension, and how morale sometimes dipped for no particular reason. She didn't have a magic solution, but she had learned over the years that small gestures could make a big difference. A smile, a kind word, a simple offer to help could shift the mood in a room. She often found herself walking over to a stressed coworker, offering to assist with a minor task, or just listening as they vented their frustrations. She never made a show of it. It was simply who she was. Her coworkers often noticed her quiet strength, though not everyone understood it. Some thought of her as shy, some as reserved, but those who took the time to notice saw something more. A genuine care for others, an unspoken empathy that made people feel seen and heard. She wasn't the type to seek recognition or accolades. Her satisfaction came from the knowledge that she had made someone's day a little easier, a little brighter. The office had a small piano in the corner of the main lobby, a relic from years past. Most people ignored it, seeing it as an unnecessary piece of furniture, a thing that gathered dust. But she saw it differently. To her, it was an invitation, a space where creativity could flow freely without judgment. She would sometimes glance at it during breaks, imagining the melodies she could play, imagining the notes weaving through the air, touching everyone who heard them. She didn't play in front of others often, preferring the quiet solitude of her own practice at home. But there was a gentle longing that grew inside her whenever she saw the piano, an urge to share the joy she felt when music filled a room. It was a Tuesday morning when the first small shift began. The office was unusually quiet. Some employees had been called for meetings elsewhere, and others had arrived late, leaving a sparse group in the main area. She noticed a coworker sitting at a desk, frowning at a spreadsheet, clearly frustrated. Without thinking too much, she walked over and asked if she could help. The coworker hesitated, then nodded, grateful for the assistance. She spent the next few minutes guiding them through the process, pointing out small errors and suggesting easier ways to handle the data. The relief on the coworker's face was immediate, and it warmed her heart. She didn't expect thanks, but a small smile and a nod were enough. As she returned to her own desk, her eyes drifted to the piano again. It had been a while since she had played here, in this space, where the music could ripple out into the open. The thought struck her suddenly. What if just a few moments of music could change the energy in the room? She hesitated for a second, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. Then, with a quiet breath, she walked to the piano and let her fingers rest lightly on the keys. She didn't plan a specific tune. She simply let her hands move, letting the notes come naturally, guided by instinct and feeling. The first few notes were soft, tentative, almost as if she were testing the air. But then she relaxed, letting the melody flow more freely. The sound was gentle, warm, and strangely comforting. It filled the lobby, weaving around the desks, touching the small group of employees who were still present. Heads lifted from computers, and a few people paused to listen, not expecting anything. There was no grand performance, no showmanship, just the honest, heartfelt expression of someone who loved music and wanted to share it. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. The stress that had clung to the office that morning seemed to lighten. Smiles appeared on faces that had been tense, and a sense of calm settled over the space. She didn't stop to notice the reactions at first. Her focus was entirely on the music, on the way it seemed to speak without words. But gradually, she became aware of small changes around her. A coworker who had been frowning let out a soft laugh at a playful trill of notes. Another employee leaned back in their chair, eyes closing briefly, letting the sound wash over them. Even the office manager, usually stern and focused on schedules and deadlines, paused at the doorway, listening. It was in these moments that she realized the impact of something as simple as music. It could shift moods, bring people together, and offer a brief respite from the pressures of work. When she finally stopped, the room seemed brighter, not just from the sunlight streaming through the windows, but from the subtle energy that had shifted in the air. The coworker she had helped earlier gave a small, appreciative nod. Others returned to their tasks with lighter steps and calmer expressions. She quietly returned to her desk, feeling a gentle warmth in her chest, not from praise or recognition, but from the simple knowledge that she had made a difference. That day, nothing dramatic happened. No one called a meeting to announce her talent, and no clients came rushing in to see the office musician. It was just a quiet, ordinary day, made a little better by someone's willingness to help and share her gifts. But in those small, seemingly insignificant moments, she began to see the ripple effects of her actions. A smile here, a helping hand there, a few spontaneous notes on a piano. Each act, no matter how small, had the potential to touch lives in ways she couldn't yet imagine. By the end of the day, she packed her things slowly, savoring the calm energy that lingered. She walked past the piano once more, brushing her fingers over the keys lightly, as if to say thank you for being there. She didn't know what the future held, nor did she plan to make it extraordinary. She simply wanted to continue helping, quietly, naturally, and with all the music and kindness she had to offer. The next morning, she arrived at the office feeling a little lighter, though she wasn't quite sure why. The memory of the previous day's spontaneous music lingered in her mind, not as a boast or a triumph, but as a gentle reminder of how small acts could shift the energy around her. She didn't expect anyone to remember, yet as she walked through the main area, she noticed subtle changes. A few colleagues glanced at her with curiosity, offering polite smiles, while others hummed quietly at their desks, a tune she recognized as one she had played yesterday. She didn't say anything, didn't draw attention to herself. She simply returned to her desk, feeling a quiet satisfaction in the unspoken connection her music had created. The company was preparing for an important meeting that day, one that involved a potential client whose interest could mean a significant boost in revenue. Everyone was busy, focused, and slightly tense. She could sense the nervous energy floating in the air, a mix of excitement and apprehension. People moved quickly, talking in low tones, checking documents and presentations, adjusting slides and double-checking numbers. She observed it all, noticing how a misstep could ripple through the team, how small mistakes could quickly turn into bigger concerns. She wanted to help, but this time it wasn't about spreadsheets or files. She felt a pull toward something bigger, something that could make the moment feel less tense and more human. During a brief lull, she walked past the lobby where the piano sat. She paused, running her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the familiar cool touch. The notes responded almost instinctively, forming a simple melody that was soft but carried a subtle energy. It wasn't a complex tune, not a performance meant to impress. It was music that reflected the moment. Calm, steady, and encouraging. She wondered if anyone would notice, if it would have any impact at all. Then she realized it didn't matter. The act of playing, the simple gesture of sharing her music, was enough. It had always been enough. As she began to play, the atmosphere in the office shifted almost immediately. People who had been hunched over their computers straightened slightly, their brows relaxing. The team working on the client presentation paused, listening without fully realizing it, as the melody drifted through the room. She noticed small smiles forming, fingers tapping lightly on keyboards, a gentle rhythm that seemed to mirror the flow of her music. Even the most anxious employees found themselves breathing a little easier, their tension softening under the gentle touch of her spontaneous performance. A few colleagues came closer, curious about the source of this unexpected calm. They didn't interrupt her, didn't speak. They simply watched and listened, drawn in by the sincerity and ease of her playing. The room felt warmer, more connected, as if her music had opened an invisible path between everyone present. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was noticeable. People exchanged subtle glances, a silent acknowledgement that something different had just happened. It was as if the office had taken a collective breath, finding a moment of balance in the midst of the day's rush. Among those watching was a senior executive, someone who usually kept a strict focus on numbers and deadlines. They paused at the doorway, leaning slightly to catch the notes that filled the room. Their expressions softened, a small, unspoken recognition forming in their eyes. They didn't interrupt, didn't call attention, but they remembered. It was a rare thing, this ability to capture the attention of someone so focused, to create a space where stress could ease and minds could think more clearly. She wasn't aware of it in the moment, but this small act was already making an impression that could grow beyond the walls of the office. After a few minutes, she stopped playing. The room settled into a quiet that felt different from the tense stillness before. It was lighter, more open, as if the music had left a gentle imprint that lingered. People returned to their tasks, but the change was subtle yet meaningful. Conversations flowed more easily, collaboration felt smoother, and the stress that had threatened to overwhelm the team seemed to fade just a little. She returned to her desk, feeling a quiet warmth, the kind that comes from knowing you have contributed something meaningful without asking for recognition or reward. Later that afternoon, the executive who had paused at the doorway approached her. Their tone was gentle, friendly, but carried an unmistakable curiosity. They asked if she had played the piano, if it was something she did often. She nodded, a little shy, explaining that she played for enjoyment and to help lift the mood when the office felt tense. There was no pretension in her words, no need to embellish. She simply spoke the truth. She played because it brought calm and made people feel a little better. The executive listened attentively, then offered a small, thoughtful smile. It wasn't praise in the formal sense, but it carried weight. Someone in a position of influence had noticed, and more importantly, they understood the value of her contribution. Word of her music spread quietly throughout the office over the next few days. People began to anticipate her presence near the piano during breaks, curious to hear the melodies she would create. It wasn't a spectacle. There were no crowds, no applause. Instead, there was a subtle sense of connection and shared experience. Colleagues would pause to listen while others returned to their work, each finding a moment of calm or inspiration in the notes that filled the air. The office felt different, not dramatically, but in a way that everyone sensed without needing to explain. Her music had created a gentle rhythm that carried through the workspace, making ordinary moments feel a little more alive. One afternoon, a colleague who had been struggling with a particularly difficult project approached her quietly. They confessed that they had been feeling overwhelmed, unable to focus or find a solution. Without hesitation, she invited them to sit at the piano together. She guided their fingers gently over the keys, showing how simple patterns could create pleasant harmonies. In that moment, it wasn't about talent or expertise. It was about collaboration, encouragement, and the quiet reassurance that someone cared. By the time they returned to their project, Their mood had lifted, their mind clearer, and their stress significantly reduced. She smiled quietly, happy to help without making it a show. These small gestures, she realized, were just as powerful as any formal achievement. Over time, her spontaneous music began to influence more than just mood. Ideas flowed more freely during team meetings, creativity seemed to flourish, and the office culture grew subtly stronger. People were more willing to collaborate, more open to suggestions, and more patient with one another. She noticed it in small ways. A thoughtful comment in a meeting, a gentle nod of encouragement, a willingness to listen rather than react quickly. It was as if the music had created a shared understanding, a silent bond that made everyone more willing to contribute their best. Despite the growing awareness of her talent, she remained humble, never seeking attention or recognition. She played because it felt natural, because it helped others, because it brought a sense of peace to moments that could otherwise be stressful or mundane. Her focus was on the people around her, on how she could make their day just a little better, not on personal gain. It was this sincerity, this genuine care, that made her music so impactful. People responded not just to the sound, but to the intention behind it. As the company prepared for larger projects and more important client interactions, her role became quietly influential. Leadership began to see that her music had value beyond simple morale. It could be used strategically, not in a manipulative sense, but as a tool to create focus, inspire creativity, and ease tension. They observed how her presence near the piano seemed to calm nerves before meetings, and how her melodies could set a productive, positive tone. Without fanfare, she had become an unexpected anchor, a subtle force that helped guide the office through stressful times. She herself didn't notice the full extent of her influence. She continued to arrive early, enjoy the quiet moments, and play the piano whenever she felt it would help. She didn't calculate impact or strategize for recognition. Her focus remained on helping and sharing. Yet slowly, organically, the office culture shifted around her presence. People were kinder, more attentive, and more willing to support one another. The energy of the company grew, not through grand gestures or forced programs, but through small human actions rooted in kindness and creativity. And at the center of it all was her music, simple, spontaneous, and entirely genuine. As the days passed, the quiet presence of her music began to catch the attention of more people in the office, including some who normally kept themselves distant from the rest of the team. Employees who had once rushed past the piano without a second glance now paused, curious, drawn in by the gentle melodies that seemed to linger in the air. They didn't see her as a performer or a showpiece. They simply recognized that something about her music made the day feel lighter and more manageable. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but the atmosphere in the office had begun to shift in a way that everyone noticed, even if they couldn't quite name it. One morning, a senior executive arrived earlier than usual for a meeting and found her sitting at the piano. She had arrived before anyone else, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, letting her mind wander through the melodies she would play. The executive paused at the doorway, listening silently. The sound was not loud or flashy, but it carried a warmth that seemed to fill the entire space. There was a calm energy to it, a rhythm that felt natural and unforced. The executive watched for a few moments, taken aback by the authenticity of her playing. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't intended to impress, yet it captured attention in a way that was impossible to ignore. Word of this quiet talent began to spread through the office. People started mentioning how the music seemed to change the energy in the room, how it made them feel more focused, more inspired, or just more at ease. Colleagues who had never interacted much with her now found reasons to stop by the piano, sometimes bringing small problems or questions, just to linger in the presence of the calm energy her music provided. Meetings seemed to run more smoothly, brainstorming sessions flowed with greater creativity, and tension eased more quickly when her melodies filled the space. She remained humble, never expecting recognition, never performing with an audience in mind. The piano was her way of connecting, a method of helping without words, and she had no desire to turn it into anything more than that. Yet the impact of her actions was becoming clear, and even she began to notice subtle differences. People were kinder, more patient, more willing to listen to one another. The office felt less like a collection of individual workers and more like a community, a group of people bound together by shared effort and mutual respect. She didn't take credit, didn't feel pride in the traditional sense, but she recognized that her presence, her small act of sharing music, was making a difference. It was during a particularly busy week that the potential of her music became even more apparent. The company was preparing a major presentation for a client that could bring in a significant contract. The team was nervous, everyone feeling the weight of expectations and deadlines. People were rushing back and forth, double-checking documents, rehearsing their talking points, and fretting over every detail. She noticed the stress in the room, how it weighed on everyone's shoulders, and she felt a quiet urge to help. Without a formal invitation, she walked to the piano and began to play a soft, flowing melody. It was calm, steady, and unexpectedly grounding. The effect was immediate. People paused, even in the midst of their busy tasks. The melody offered a moment of respite, a brief pause from the tension. The atmosphere softened, the nervous energy eased, and the room seemed to breathe collectively. Employees exchanged glances, smiles forming where tension had once resided. It was subtle but powerful. The music had given them a moment of clarity, a chance to reset and refocus. In that small span of time, her spontaneous action had changed the dynamic of the office, turning anxiety into calm anticipation. The senior executive who had noticed her before approached once again, this time more intentionally. They observed her from a short distance, appreciating not only the skill but also the intention behind her playing. They realized that her music had the ability to influence the mood of a room, to help people think more clearly, and to create an environment where creativity could thrive. It was an insight that went beyond entertainment. It was a recognition of how human connection and subtle, thoughtful gestures could have meaningful impacts in a professional setting. They approached her after she finished, speaking with a tone of genuine interest, asking how she felt about using her music to help in larger ways, perhaps even during key presentations or important meetings. She was hesitant at first, not because she doubted her ability, but because she had never considered her playing as anything beyond personal expression and small acts of kindness. She hadn't thought about impact or strategy. She had only thought about helping in the moment in ways that felt natural. But as she listened to the executive's words, she realized that there was an opportunity to make a broader difference. Not for personal gain, not for recognition, but to help the company, to support her colleagues, and to enhance the work environment in ways that had real consequences. The idea began to take shape slowly. She started experimenting with short musical pieces that could accompany meetings or brainstorming sessions. The music was never intrusive. It was carefully crafted to create focus, to lift spirits, and to provide a gentle backdrop for thinking. She observed the effects with quiet satisfaction, noting how small changes in tone or rhythm influenced the energy of the room. People were more engaged, more collaborative, and more willing to explore creative solutions. Her music, once spontaneous and private, was becoming a subtle tool for collective growth, a way to enhance human connection and productivity. One day, during a particularly high-stakes client pitch, the executive suggested she play a brief piece to set the mood. She agreed, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. The conference room was tense, the team anxious, but as her fingers touched the keys and the first notes filled the air, the atmosphere shifted. The client, initially guarded and reserved, began to relax. The team members found their focus, their confidence growing as the music provided a calming, encouraging presence. By the end of the meeting, the client's reception had changed dramatically. They were engaged, attentive, and positively impressed, a result that could be partially traced back to the gentle influence of her spontaneous music. The impact of that day was not lost on the leadership team. They began to see her music not just as a pleasant addition to the office environment, but as a unique asset that had tangible effects on company outcomes. It was a recognition that did not come through loud announcements or accolades, but through observation, reflection, and the subtle shifts they experienced in meetings, presentations, and everyday work life. Her humble, human-centered approach had proven to be both meaningful and powerful. Even as her music gained recognition, she remained grounded. She continued to arrive early, to enjoy the quiet moments, to play when it felt right, and to support her colleagues in small, thoughtful ways. She never allowed the growing acknowledgement to change her intentions or her approach. Her focus remained on helping, on creating small ripples of positive energy that could touch lives in ways that mattered. She found joy in the simplicity of her actions, in the quiet impact of her presence, and in the realization that meaningful contributions do not always come from grand gestures, but from consistent, genuine acts rooted in kindness and creativity. Through it all, her connection to music remained personal and heartfelt. She never saw herself as a performer or a celebrity within the company. The piano was a medium for empathy, communication, and subtle leadership. It allowed her to influence moods, encourage collaboration, and inspire confidence without saying a word. The executive and other leadership members recognized its value, but she saw it simply as a way to help others, to share a part of herself that could make a difference, and to bring a human touch to an otherwise routine office environment. By the end of this period, her role in the office had evolved quietly but meaningfully. She was no longer just an administrative employee. She had become a catalyst for positivity, a quiet force that shaped the dynamics of the team, and an unexpected contributor to the company's success. Her impact was not measured in titles, awards, or recognition, but in the way people interacted, collaborated, and felt supported in their work. Through her spontaneous piano music, she had created connections, eased tensions, and inspired confidence. And all of it had begun with a simple desire to help, a few notes played from the heart, and a commitment to making the days of those around her just a little brighter. As the company continued to navigate important projects and high-stakes presentations, her music became more than just a source of comfort. It began to shape how people approached challenges. One morning, the leadership team faced a complex situation. A major client was considering withdrawing a deal, and tensions were running high. The team gathered in the conference room, papers rustling, voices tense, and everyone was on edge. She noticed the anxiety, not just in the voices but in the small gestures, the tight shoulders, the restless hands, the uneasy glances exchanged across the table. She felt a familiar pull, an instinctive sense that she could help, not with words or data, but with the simple language she knew best, music. Quietly, she walked to the piano that had become a staple in the lobby, carrying no expectations, just a desire to contribute in her own way. As her fingers touched the keys, the room seemed to shift before the first notes had even fully formed. The sound was calm, steady, and deliberate, guiding the nervous energy into a more focused state. The melody was simple, but it had a rhythm that seemed to mirror the heartbeat of the room, slow and steady, offering a subtle sense of reassurance. She could see the team slowly settling, tension giving way to concentration, as if the music was a bridge between stress and clarity. One by one, the team members began to relax, their shoulders dropping, their voices softening, and their attention sharpening. The client had yet to arrive, but the atmosphere was no longer one of panic or pressure. Her music had created a space where people could think clearly, collaborate without fear of mistakes, and approach the challenge with a renewed sense of possibility. It was remarkable to observe the effect of something so simple yet so profoundly human. She didn't need to say a word. The music spoke for her, and for everyone else in the room, it was exactly what was needed. When the client arrived, the energy that had been carefully cultivated carried over into the meeting. The team was composed, confident, and in sync. The discussion flowed more naturally, ideas were presented with clarity, and solutions were proposed with creativity. The client, sensing the calm but productive environment, responded positively. Questions that might have triggered defensiveness were met with thoughtful answers, and concerns that might have caused friction were addressed with patience. It was not a direct result of her music alone, but her presence and the atmosphere she had helped create played an invisible yet undeniable role in the successful interaction. The leadership team took note of this effect. They began to see that her music could be integrated in more intentional ways to support the company's goals. They invited her to play before important meetings, during brainstorming sessions, and even at informal client gatherings. Each time, she approached it with the same humility and sincerity, never aiming for recognition, always focusing on the human element, helping others feel grounded, inspired, and supported. The results were consistent. Creativity flowed more easily, collaboration improved, and challenges were met with a collective calm that had previously been absent. Her influence grew quietly but steadily. Colleagues who had once viewed the piano as just a piece of furniture now saw it as a tool for connection and focus. Employees began to approach her for advice on timing and tone, curious about how she managed to create such a calming presence through music. She shared her insights generously, always emphasizing the intention behind the notes rather than technique or skill. It was about understanding the human response, about noticing how small gestures could make a big difference in moments of tension or uncertainty. The company began to see measurable results. Presentations that had previously struggled to capture attention were now received with enthusiasm. Brainstorming sessions that had once been fraught with conflict became opportunities for genuine collaboration. Even routine tasks were completed with a renewed sense of purpose and energy. Her music had become a catalyst for positive change, a subtle but powerful force that influenced outcomes beyond what anyone had expected. And through it all, she remained grounded, never letting the growing recognition alter her approach or intentions. During one particularly important project, the company faced a critical deadline with multiple departments involved. The complexity and pressure were immense, and conflicts began to emerge as different teams pushed for their priorities. Sensing the rising tension, she once again turned to the piano. She didn't play a full composition, didn't perform in front of an audience, but let her fingers guide a gentle, flowing melody that invited focus and cooperation. The effect was immediate. Arguments softened, rigid positions became more flexible, and the energy shifted from confrontation to collaboration. Team members found common ground, and the project began moving forward with a sense of shared purpose. Leadership recognized that her contributions were more than symbolic. They were practical and strategic. They began to incorporate her music as a component of company culture, using it to ease transitions, mark important milestones, and support collaborative efforts. She became an integral part of the company's approach to problem-solving and human-centered leadership, though she never claimed credit for herself. Her focus remained on helping, on observing and responding to needs, and on sharing a gift that was uniquely hers. The results spoke for themselves, and her influence continued to grow quietly but powerfully. Despite the growing responsibilities, she maintained her authenticity. She never allowed the recognition to change her natural approach, never sought attention, and never used her talent for personal gain. Each day, she arrived early, enjoyed the quiet moments, and played when it felt right. She engaged with colleagues not as someone elevated above them, but as someone willing to help, to support, and to contribute in ways that mattered. Her approach was human-centric, grounded in empathy, observation, and genuine care for the people around her. Through this period, she also began mentoring others in subtle ways. She shared insights about mindfulness, focus, and creating positive energy, often through small gestures or brief conversations rather than formal instruction. She encouraged coworkers to notice the small moments that could change their day, to offer support when possible, and to recognize the power of intentional actions, even when they seemed minor. Her impact extended beyond music, influencing the culture, attitudes, and interactions throughout the office. By the end of this period, it was clear that her spontaneous piano music had done more than lift moods. It had become a catalyst for opportunity, a way to strengthen connections, and a practical tool for the company's success. It had opened doors, eased tensions, inspired creativity, and fostered collaboration. Yet for her, the experience remained simple and grounded. She played because she loved it, because she wanted to help, and because she recognized that small acts of kindness and thoughtfulness could ripple outward in unexpected and meaningful ways. Her story, at this point, was no longer just about an individual with a talent. It was about how one person's genuine desire to help could create tangible results for an entire organization. The company recognized it, her colleagues felt it, and she herself knew it, though she never allowed it to become a source of pride or distraction. She remained centered on the human experience, on connection, and on the quiet power of empathy expressed through her music. In doing so, she had demonstrated something profound. That sometimes the simplest, most authentic gestures can have the most significant impact, shaping not just moments but the trajectory of an entire team and company. The day of the big presentation arrived, and the atmosphere in the office was electric. Everyone was anxious, aware that the outcome of this meeting could change the course of the company's future. Colleagues were reviewing documents, rehearsing their talking points, and pacing nervously in the hallways. She observed the tension with a quiet awareness, understanding how the stress affected not just performance but morale. She knew that she could contribute in her own way, the way she always had, and she quietly prepared herself to do so. Before the client arrived, she walked to the piano in the lobby, as she had done countless times before. She didn't announce her presence, didn't draw attention, but simply let her fingers rest on the keys, feeling the familiar cool surface beneath her hands. She played a few notes softly, testing the air, and then allowed the music to flow naturally. The melody was calm, encouraging, and steady, not meant to impress but to create a space where focus and clarity could emerge. The sound carried through the office, seeping into the conference room, gently easing the nerves of the team waiting inside. The leadership team noticed the change immediately. The tension that had been so palpable just moments before seemed to dissipate slightly, replaced by a more focused, cooperative energy. Colleagues exchanged glances, subtly acknowledging the calming effect of the music. Even those who had been deeply stressed found themselves breathing more evenly, thinking more clearly, and preparing to present their ideas with confidence. The music had done what no pep talk or motivational speech could. It had created a collective sense of calm and purpose, an invisible thread connecting everyone in the room. When the client entered, the team was ready. They had rehearsed their points, coordinated their slides, and anticipated questions. But the real difference came from the subtle shift in energy that her music had inspired. The client, initially wary and reserved, sensed the calm and confidence of the team. They were more open, attentive, and receptive, engaging in conversation rather than interrogating the presentation. Ideas flowed naturally, questions were answered thoughtfully, and solutions emerged collaboratively. The difference was remarkable, and although no one could fully articulate why, the subtle influence of her music was clear to those who were paying attention. As the meeting progressed, the team's creativity and composure impressed the client. Negotiations, which might have been tense and rigid, became fluid and collaborative. The client offered suggestions, and the team responded with adaptability and insight. The presentation ended on a high note, with the client expressing strong interest in moving forward and exploring new opportunities. There was a sense of accomplishment in the room, a shared recognition that everyone had contributed to a successful outcome. She quietly acknowledged her role in creating the environment that allowed this to happen, not as a claim of credit, but as a simple understanding that small, thoughtful actions can have far-reaching effects. After the client departed, the office buzzed with energy. Colleagues congratulated one another, sharing smiles, laughter, and a sense of relief. There was pride in the achievement, but also gratitude for the way the day had unfolded. She returned to her desk, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She hadn't sought recognition, hadn't aimed to impress, but had simply played her music in a moment when it felt right. And yet, in doing so, she had helped facilitate a breakthrough that would have lasting impact on the company. Leadership, too, took notice. They recognized that her music had not only influenced the mood and collaboration of the team, but had indirectly contributed to the company securing a significant opportunity. They approached her with genuine appreciation, acknowledging the unique and valuable role she had played. She received their words humbly, emphasizing that her intention had always been to help, not to seek praise. But even so, the acknowledgement was meaningful, a quiet affirmation of the impact one person can have when they act with authenticity, care, and intention. In the days following the presentation, her influence continued to grow, though quietly. Colleagues began to incorporate small acts inspired by her example, supporting one another, noticing moments of stress, and finding ways to create calm and focus. The office culture was shifting in subtle but significant ways, fostering collaboration, creativity, and a shared sense of purpose. She remained at the heart of this change, not as a leader in the traditional sense, but as a human presence that encouraged empathy, mindfulness, and thoughtful action. She also began experimenting with how her music could enhance other aspects of the company's work. She played during brainstorming sessions, helping ideas to flow more freely. She accompanied workshops, guiding participants to focus and engage. Even during routine office hours, the piano became a gentle companion, a source of calm energy that encouraged productivity and creativity. Her approach was always natural, never forced, and always centered on the people around her rather than the performance itself. One particularly memorable moment occurred when a junior employee, who had been struggling with a challenging project, approached her for guidance. Instead of offering direct solutions, she invited them to sit at the piano together. She guided their fingers over simple patterns, showing how small, deliberate actions could create harmony, not just in music, but in problem-solving and collaboration. The experience was transformative for the employee, who returned to their work with renewed focus, confidence, and a sense of connection. These moments, small as they might have seemed, were evidence of the profound impact that empathy, creativity, and human connection could have on the workplace. Her music also began to influence the company's external interactions. During informal client visits, her melodies created welcoming and calm environments. During presentations, the atmosphere was more conducive to collaboration and negotiation. Even in moments of uncertainty, her presence and music provided a stabilizing influence. The company began to recognize that success was not only about strategy, numbers, or products, but about the human experience, the environment, and the energy that people brought into every interaction. Her contributions were a quiet but essential part of this understanding. Despite all of this, she never allowed recognition or expectation to change her approach. She continued to arrive early, to enjoy quiet moments, and to play when it felt natural. She engaged with colleagues, offered support, and shared her insights in subtle ways. Her focus remained on helping others, on creating moments of calm and inspiration, and on fostering collaboration and human connection. The results were evident, but her intentions remained pure and grounded. By the end of this period, it was clear that her spontaneous piano music had become a cornerstone of the company's success. It had facilitated breakthroughs, inspired confidence, and strengthened collaboration. Yet for her, the achievement was not about personal glory or recognition. It was about the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had made a meaningful difference. The story of her impact was a reminder that simple, authentic acts of kindness and creativity can ripple outward, shaping not only individual experiences, but the trajectory of an entire organization. And in the midst of it all, she remained true to herself, guided by a genuine desire to help, a love for music, and an unwavering focus on the human element at the heart of every success. After months of quietly influencing the office with her music, the full impact of her presence began to become clear. Her colleagues, once focused solely on tasks and deadlines, now noticed the subtle ways in which her melodies had changed the workplace. Meetings flowed more smoothly, collaboration became easier, and a sense of calm and focus had woven itself into the daily rhythm of the office. She didn't seek credit or attention for any of this, yet the effects were undeniable, reaching far beyond what anyone had expected. One morning, the executive who had first recognized her talent approached her with a warm smile. They thanked her for the countless ways her music had contributed to the company's success. They spoke about the big presentations, the client interactions, and the moments when her melodies had helped everyone stay calm and focused under pressure. She listened quietly, feeling a mix of surprise and gratitude, though she reminded them that she had only ever intended to help in small ways. The acknowledgement was meaningful, but her joy remained rooted in the simple act of sharing her music and helping others feel more at ease. The leadership team decided to create a small, informal recognition for her contributions. They didn't want to create a spectacle or make her uncomfortable, but they wanted her to know how valuable her influence had become. They organized a quiet gathering, inviting her close colleagues and a few key executives, and expressed appreciation for her dedication, creativity, and empathy. The room was filled with genuine warmth, laughter, and heartfelt words. She felt a deep sense of connection to the people around her, realizing that the small gestures and quiet efforts she had put into helping others had not gone unnoticed. It was a moment of affirmation, not for ego, but for the shared humanity and kindness that had guided her actions. Despite the recognition, she continued her daily routine without change. She arrived early, enjoyed the quiet moments, and played the piano when it felt natural. Her focus remained on the people around her, on creating a calm and supportive environment, and on fostering collaboration and creativity. She understood that her role wasn't about personal glory, but about the ripple effects of small, thoughtful actions. Each time she played, each moment she helped a colleague or eased tension in the room, she was contributing to a larger, meaningful outcome. Over time, she noticed the ways in which her influence had extended beyond the office walls. Clients commented on the welcoming and professional atmosphere of the company. Colleagues reported feeling more motivated, creative, and confident in their work. Even the culture of the office had shifted, with empathy, cooperation, and mindfulness becoming more visible and appreciated. Her music had created a human-centric environment, one where people felt valued, supported, and inspired to do their best. The results were tangible, yet the approach had remained gentle, natural, and unobtrusive. She also found opportunities to mentor and inspire others, though always subtly. She shared insights about focus, creativity, and using small, intentional actions to influence outcomes positively. She encouraged colleagues to notice moments of stress or tension and to respond with empathy and thoughtful gestures. Her approach was never prescriptive. It was a gentle demonstration of how kindness, patience, and creativity could shape experiences and outcomes. Through her example, others began to see the value of paying attention to human needs and responding with care, not because it was required, but because it made a meaningful difference. One day, she reflected on how far things had come. What had started as a spontaneous desire to help, playing music to lift moods and ease tension, had grown into something far more significant. Her actions had influenced the culture, productivity, and success of the company. She had helped create a space where people could thrive, collaborate, and feel appreciated. And yet, she hadn't changed her approach or her intentions. She had remained authentic, humble, and focused on the simple goal of helping others. That realization filled her with quiet satisfaction and gratitude. The company, in turn, began to integrate her approach more systematically, recognizing the power of human connection and empathy alongside strategy and planning. They encouraged managers to observe the ways small gestures and thoughtful actions could influence teams positively. They incorporated moments of calm and creativity into meetings and presentations, often inspired by the atmosphere her music had created. Her influence had extended far beyond her own contributions, shaping the approach of leadership and the behavior of colleagues across departments. Even as her role became more recognized, she maintained a balance that allowed her to remain grounded. She continued to focus on the people, the environment, and the impact of her actions rather than on personal achievement. She enjoyed quiet moments at the piano, taking pleasure in the simple act of creating music, observing the subtle shifts in energy, and noticing the positive responses of those around her. It was a practice of presence, empathy, and thoughtfulness that became part of her daily rhythm, guiding her interactions and influence in ways that were profound yet understated. Her story became an example to others in the company, a reminder that genuine, human-centered actions can create lasting and meaningful impact. It wasn't about formal leadership, titles, or accolades. It was about recognizing opportunities to help, acting with empathy, and contributing in ways that were authentic and thoughtful. She demonstrated that even small, spontaneous acts could ripple outward, shaping culture, collaboration, and success in ways that were not immediately visible but deeply felt. Through all of this, she remained herself, humble, caring, and focused on the human experience. She had discovered that true influence does not come from seeking recognition, but from understanding the needs of others and responding with kindness, creativity, and consistency. Her music had been the catalyst, but it was her authenticity and commitment to helping others that created the lasting effects. She had learned that impact is often quiet, subtle, and human, and that by remaining present and sincere, she could contribute to something much larger than herself. In the end, she reflected on her journey with gratitude and humility. The company had grown, the culture had evolved, and countless individuals had been positively affected by her presence and her music. Yet her focus remained on the simple joys of each day, arriving early, playing the piano, helping colleagues, and noticing the small ways she could make a difference. Her story was a testament to the power of authenticity, empathy, and spontaneous acts of kindness. It showed that one person, acting with intention and heart, could change not only a room but an entire organization, leaving a legacy that was quietly profound, deeply human, and endlessly inspiring.